The diplomatic shock. The 47th emergency session of the Galactic Council began exactly as Ambassador Sarah Chen had expected, with complete and utter chaos. From her position in the human observation bubble, floating high above the grand amphitheater of the Galactic Assembly, she watched the familiar scene unfold with practiced patience. After 15 years as Earth's chief diplomat to the stars, very little could shake her composure, not even the sight of 300 different species simultaneously trying to object to humanity's petition for membership. Order. I demand order in these chambers. High Chancellor Zix 427's crystalline appendage slammed against the quantum resonance podium, sending cascading sparkles of light through the massive chamber. Their bioluminescent patches pulsed with barely contained irritation, cycling through shades of deep purple and acid green. Sarah took another sip of her coffee, her third cup of the morning, and exchanged knowing looks with Dr. James Henderson, Earth's chief xenobiologist. They'd been through this routine dozens of times before. Every time humanity achieved another milestone required for membership, the Council would convene, debate, and ultimately find another reason to delay their application. We are gathered here today, Zix 427 continued, their voice resonating through the universal translators, to discuss Earth's petition for membership in the galactic community. A wave of derisive clicking, whistling, and electromagnetic pulses swept through the chamber. Ambassador Silk of the Photosynthetic Consortium raised all four of their leaf-like appendages. With all due respect, High Chancellor, why are we wasting valuable photons discussing this? These humans haven't even figured out how to properly colonize their own solar system. Here, came the agreement from various corners of the chamber, expressed in at least 17 different forms of communication. They still use combustion engines, chittered Representative Bizet 9 of the Silicon Consciousness, their crystalline structure flickering with disdain. And their primary form of entertainment involves staring at two-dimensional light patterns, added Counselor Void Walker of the Energy Beings, their form rippling with what might have been laughter. Sarah took another long sip of her coffee, letting the warm liquid calm her nerves. She'd learned early in her diplomatic career that getting angry at alien prejudice was about as productive as getting angry at gravity. Instead, she focused on the subtle undercurrents in the chamber, the few species showing genuine curiosity, the ones remaining diplomatically neutral, and most importantly, the handful of potential allies they'd cultivated over the years. High Chancellor Zix 427's bioluminescence shifted to a shade of deep purple, the universal signal for someone about to get bureaucratically destroyed. Need I remind the honored members of this council that according to Galactic Law, Article 7, Subsection 42, Paragraph 13, Line 894, any species that achieves faster-than-light travel independently is automatically eligible for consideration. But they're so squishy, muttered Ambassador Crystalline of the Silicon Federation, their facets refracting light in a pattern that conveyed extreme skepticism. And they insist on covering themselves with processed fiber strands, added another representative, causing several energy-based species to pulse with disgust. The High Chancellor's next words were cut off by a frantic junior aide bursting into the chamber, their tentacles tied in literal knots, a clear sign of distress among the Silipodian bureaucrats. High Chancellor. Urgent news from the Scientific Division. The humans, we've discovered something about them. The chamber erupted once again, this time with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Nobody had ever seen a Silipodian aide interrupt a council session before, their species literally prided themselves on their adherence to proper bureaucratic procedure. Zix 427's bioluminescent patches cycled through every known color in the visible spectrum. Well, out with it. The aide's tentacles somehow tied themselves into even more complicated knots. The humans, they. Every being in the chamber leaned forward, or their species equivalent thereof. They can metabolize caffeine. The silence that followed was so profound that you could have heard a photon drop. Sarah nearly choked on her coffee, suddenly aware that every alien eye, sensory organ, or perception apparatus in the chamber was fixed on her and her half-empty cup. In the scientific division's laboratory several levels below, Dr. Zelp 8 couldn't believe the readings on their scanner. They recalibrated it for the 7th time, their gelatinous form quivering with a mixture of excitement and terror. "Chief Researcher," they burbled to their superior, "you need to see this immediately." Chief Researcher Quantum Wave drifted over, their energy form condensing slightly in anticipation. "What could possibly be so important that you'd interrupt my temporal meditation?" "It's about the humans' biological scans, specifically their reaction to methylxanthine compounds." "Speak plainly, Zelp 8. Some of us don't have all-day cycles to waste on." "They drink it, Chief. They intentionally extract it from plants, process it, and consume it. And not just that, they've built an entire cultural infrastructure around its consumption." The chief researcher's energy form flickered rapidly, the equivalent of a double take. "That's impossible. Methylxanthine compounds are toxic to 99.99% of known carbon-based life forms. The amount they'd need to consume to build tolerance would kill them first." At that precise moment, Dr. Henderson walked into the lab, carrying his 4th cup of extra-strong coffee of the morning. Both alien researchers watched in horror as he drained the entire cup in one long gulp. "Morning, folks," he said cheerfully, tossing the empty cup into a recycler. "Anyone want to grab some coffee? I'm making another run." Chief Researcher Quantum Wave's energy form sparked erratically. You just, how are you still alive?" "Oh, this?" Henderson gestured to his empty cup. "That was just my morning warm-up. Wait until you see what happens during our afternoon meetings." Back in the council chamber, the implications of the scientific discovery were starting to sink in. Species after species began accessing their biological databases, confirming what they already knew: caffeine was one of the most widely recognized toxic compounds in the galaxy. It was used as a natural pesticide by certain plants, a defense mechanism so effective that most species had evolved to avoid it entirely. Yet here were the humans, not only resistant to it but actively seeking it out, processing it, and consuming it in quantities that would kill most sentient beings instantly. Ambassador Chen watched as the mood in the chamber shifted from dismissive to uncertain. She could almost see the calculations happening behind various alien anatomies. What other toxic substances might humans be immune to? What military applications might this have? What advantages might this give humanity in interstellar trade? "High Chancellor," she said, standing up and activating her universal translator. "If I may address the Council." Zix 427's bioluminescent patches had settled into a steady pulse of deep blue, the color of intense thought. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth." Sarah held up her coffee cup, making sure every being in the chamber could see it. "Members of the Council, what you've discovered today is just the beginning. You see, we humans have a saying, life begins after coffee. Perhaps it's time we discussed exactly what that means for our place in the galactic community." The chamber erupted into chaos once again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the dismissive chaos of earlier, this was the chaos of a paradigm shift, of hundreds of species simultaneously realizing that they might have severely underestimated these strange, squishy beings from Earth. And Sarah Chen, taking another sip of her now cold coffee, allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes, she reflected, the most powerful diplomatic tools weren't weapons or technology or even faster-than-light travel. Sometimes, they were just a simple cup of coffee. The Coffee Revolution. 6 months after the infamous coffee incident at the Galactic Council, Earth's first officially sanctioned interstellar coffee shop opened on Centauri Prime, the bustling trade hub of the Silicon Federation. The establishment, named Humanity's Cup, was a fortress disguised as a cafe, complete with class for biological containment fields, hazmat-certified baristas, and enough warning signs to fill a small library. Maya Rodriguez, master barista and Earth's first coffee ambassador, stood behind the quantum-reinforced counter, watching with amusement as a group of crystalline beings cautiously approached the observation window. Their crystalline structures refracted light in patterns that her universal translator interpreted as a mixture of fear and fascination. "Is it true?" the boldest of them asked, their voice resonating through the specialized communication field. "You actually immerse your drinking vessels in this toxin?" Maya lifted her personal coffee mug, a souvenir from her old cafe in Seattle, and took a long, deliberate sip. The crystalline beings vibrated in collective shock, their structures emanating patterns that the translator didn't even try to interpret. "Not only that," she said, grinning, "but this is my 6th cup today." The ensuing crystalline harmonic resonance nearly shattered 3 of the reinforced observation windows. Back on Earth, in the newly established Department of Xenocaffeination, DOCS, Director Sarah Chen, recently promoted from her ambassador role, was dealing with a different kind of crisis. Her holoscreen displayed real-time market data that would have been incomprehensible 6 months ago. Coffee futures were now being traded in quantum credits, Earth's coffee plantations were being classified as strategic resources, and there was serious discussion about establishing a coffee defense force. Another trade request from the energy beings, her AI assistant reported. "They're offering 3 small stars in exchange for exclusive rights to study our coffee cultivation techniques." Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. "Remind them, again, that we can't actually trade celestial bodies. It's against at least 7 different galactic treaties. They've also included a secondary offer of advanced fusion technology. Now that's more like it." Sarah took a sip from her own cup, a special blend from the highlands of Kenya. "Forward it to the International Coffee Trade Commission. And please tell me the situation on Proxima 3 has been resolved." The AI's avatar flickered slightly. "The smuggling ring has been complicated by recent developments. It seems several members of the Silicon Consciousness have been attempting to enhance themselves with caffeine." Sarah nearly spat out her coffee. "They're doing what?" "Apparently, they've developed a process to incorporate coffee particles into their crystalline matrices. They're calling it ascending through awakening. That's not how any of this works." Sarah grabbed her coat. "Get me a quantum link to their medical council immediately. And someone please tell me how coffee became a religious experience for silicon-based life forms." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, aboard the merchant vessel, Buenos Dias, Captain Jack Morrison was about to make history with the first unofficial interstellar coffee run. His ship's cargo hold was filled with the most valuable substance in the known galaxy, not gold, not antimatter, but vacuum-sealed packages of premium Arabica beans. "Captain," his ship's AI reported, "we're being hailed by a photosynthetic consortium vessel." Jack took a casual sip from his floating coffee cup, one of the perks of artificial gravity. "Friendly? They're offering to trade their entire annual light harvest for 10 kilos of your cargo." "Their entire annual, that's enough energy to power a small planet." Jack nearly choked on his espresso. "They claim they've discovered that coffee grounds make exceptional fertilizer. Something about the nitrogen content and trace minerals." Jack leaned back in his captain's chair, wondering how this had become his life. 6 months ago, he'd been making simple cargo runs between Earth colonies. Now he was practically a coffee diplomat, bringing humanity's most controversial export to the stars. "Tell them we'll discuss terms," he said, "but first, would they be interested in learning about something we call a coffee futures contract?" The consequences of humanity's cosmic caffeine revelation weren't just commercial. In the prestigious Galactic Science Academy, Dr. Helena Wong was making waves with her revolutionary paper, Comparative Xenobiology, How Human Caffeine Metabolism Challenges Our Understanding of Evolution. Her laboratory had become a pilgrimage site for xenobiologists from across the galaxy. Today, she was hosting a delegation of gelatinous beings from the Hydrosphere Collective, all of whom were vibrating with excitement as she presented her findings. "The truly fascinating aspect," Helena explained, gesturing to a holographic display of human cellular structure, "isn't just that we can metabolize caffeine, it's that we've developed a cultural and social framework around its consumption. Coffee breaks, coffee shops, coffee dates, We've turned a defense mechanism into an art form. One of the gelatinous beings rippled questioningly. But how did you discover its properties initially? Surely the first human to consume it would have expected death. Helena laughed. Actually, according to legend, it was discovered by goats. The universal translator struggled for several moments with the collective ripple of confusion that passed through her audience. In the Galactic Council, the political ramifications were still unfolding. High Chancellor Zix, 427, had called an emergency session to address what was being called the caffeine crisis. We cannot ignore, they announced, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with urgency, that humanity's unique biological capability has fundamentally altered the balance of power in our community. Their coffee trade routes are becoming the new Silk Road of the galaxy. Their baristas are being treated like master alchemists. There are reports of silicon-based life forms attempting to incorporate coffee into their very structure. Ambassador Crystalline's facets darkened with concern. High Chancellor, perhaps we were hasty in our dismissal of humanity's petition for membership. Hasty? Ambassador Silk's leaves rustled with agitation. They've essentially weaponized breakfast. Do you realize they have something called death before decaf in their culture? They named a beverage espresso that contains enough methylxanthine compounds to kill a small moon. Back at Humanity's Cup on Centauri Prime, Maya was closing up for the night when she received an urgent message from Earth. The docs had approved her proposal. She was getting clearance to introduce the concept of happy hour to the galactic community. She smiled as she began planning the menu. Wait until they discovered what happened when you paired coffee with something called chocolate. In Earth's orbital diplomatic quarter, Sarah Chen was reviewing the latest reports when Dr. Henderson burst into her office, his eyes wild with excitement. Sarah, you need to see this. The energy beings, they've discovered they can absorb trace amounts of caffeine by passing through coffee steam. They're calling it a transcendental experience. We've got requests for steam rooms from 17 different energy-based species. Sarah looked at her empty coffee cup, then at the stars visible through her office window, and finally at the stack of trade proposals on her desk. James, she said slowly, I think we might need to revise our 5-year plan. Call marketing, tell them we're going to need a catchphrase better than coffee, humanity's gift to the galaxy. Already on it, James replied, pulling out his tablet. How does one small sip for man, one giant buzz for alien kind sound? Sarah groaned. Keep working on it. And James? Get me another coffee. Something tells me we're going to need it. As night fell over Earth's hemisphere, millions of coffee plants grew in carefully maintained plantations, their precious beans now worth more than their weight in antimatter. In orbit, ships from 100 worlds waited patiently for their chance to trade for a share of humanity's most valuable export. And in countless alien laboratories, scientists continued to puzzle over the mystery of how these strange, squishy beings had turned a deadly toxin into the foundation of an interstellar economic revolution. The coffee revolution wasn't just changing the galaxy, it was redefining humanity's place in it, one cup at a time. The Galactic Ripple. The first signs of trouble came not from the expected quarters, not from the trade disputes or the religious controversies or even the silicon beings' attempts at caffeine ascension. No, the first real crisis emerged from a small research station orbiting a forgotten brown dwarf star, where a team of xenoarchaeologists made a discovery that would shake the foundations of galactic society. Dr. Lyra Nash, Earth's leading xenoarchaeologist, stood before the holographic display, her coffee growing cold in her hands as she studied the ancient pictographs. Behind her, a team of diverse alien scientists waited in tense silence. You're absolutely certain about the dating? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Chief Researcher Void Whisper, their energy form dimmed to match the gravity of the moment, pulsed an affirmative. The artifacts are approximately 2.3 million years old. The civilization that created them, they were wiped out by what appears to be a catastrophic event involving mass caffeine exposure. Lyra took a deliberate sip of her coffee, aware of how the simple act now made her colleagues flinch. "And you're saying they had achieved a level of caffeine synthesis similar to ours?" "No," void whispers form flickered anxiously. "They had surpassed it. The evidence suggests they had developed a way to harness caffeine as an energy source. They had built their entire civilization around it. And then it killed them all," Lyra finished, staring at the ancient warning symbols that decorated the ruins. Symbols that, translated through millions of years and countless light years, essentially amounted to, "Beware the black drink." Back on Earth, in the secured bunker beneath the Department of Xenocaffeination, Director Sarah Chen was dealing with the political fallout of the discovery. Her holoscreen displayed a cascade of incoming messages from every corner of the galaxy, each more urgent than the last. "The Photosynthetic Consortium is calling for an immediate ban on all coffee exports," her AI assistant reported. "The Silicon Federation has suspended their coffee enhancement program, and the energy beings are, well, they're claiming that coffee steam meditation has allowed them to communicate with the ancient civilization's residual energy patterns." Sarah took a long drink from her quantum-stabilized coffee mug, a necessity now that various anti-coffee factions had attempted to sabotage Earth's coffee supply 3 times in the past month. "And what about the precursor theory?" The AI's avatar shifted uncomfortably. "It's gaining traction. The idea that the ancient civilization might have deliberately seeded coffee plants throughout the galaxy as a weapon, it's causing panic in some sectors." "Of course it is," Sarah muttered. "Because we couldn't just be the species that likes bean juice. We had to stumble into an ancient galactic conspiracy." Her quantum communicator chimed, a priority message from Maya Rodriguez, now head of interstellar coffee relations. The hologram showed Maya in what appeared to be a heavily fortified coffee shop on Centauri Prime. "We've got a situation," Maya said without preamble. "The Harmonious Collective is claiming that coffee consciousness is a form of cultural violation. They're saying the caffeine molecules are forcing alien species to adopt human thought patterns." Sarah nearly dropped her mug. "They're saying what?" "It gets better. The Silicon Consciousness Splinter Group. The ones who were trying to incorporate coffee into their matrices. They're claiming it worked. They're calling themselves the Awakened Crystal Collective now, and they're demanding recognition as a new species." In the depths of space, aboard the now legendary merchant vessel, Buenos Dias, Captain Jack Morrison was facing a different kind of crisis. His ship's sensors had detected something impossible, a massive structure, hidden in the void between stars, composed entirely of crystallized caffeine. "Analysis confirms it," his ship's AI reported. "It's some kind of ancient space station, preserved in the vacuum of space. And sir, it's still active." Jack stared at the structure through his viewport, absently noting that it bore an uncanny resemblance to a cosmic coffee bean. "Active how?" "It's brewing something, sir. On a stellar scale." Meanwhile, in the Galactic Science Academy, Dr. Helena Wong was making another breakthrough. Her team had been studying the effects of coffee on various alien physiologies when they discovered something extraordinary. "It's not just the caffeine," she explained to a packed auditorium of scientists from across the galaxy. "There's something else in coffee, something we're calling Compound X. It doesn't just stimulate, it creates neural patterns that are remarkably similar across all species. In essence, coffee isn't just keeping the galaxy awake, it's making us all think more human." The revelation caused an uproar. Some species saw it as proof of humanity's insidious influence, others as evidence of a grand cosmic design. A few fringe groups began claiming that humans were the descendants of the ancient caffeine civilization, chosen to bring the gift of awakening back to the galaxy. In the Galactic Council, the debate had reached a fever pitch. High Chancellor Zix, for 27, their bioluminescent patches now permanently stuck in a stress pattern of swirling purples and greens, tried to maintain order. "We cannot ignore the implications of this discovery," they announced. "The question is no longer whether to grant humanity membership in the galactic community. The question is whether coffee represents the greatest threat to galactic civilization since the quantum wars, or its salvation. Ambassador Crystalline, their structure now showing distinct coffee-colored bands from their experiments with the awakened crystal collective, raised a faceted appendage. Perhaps it's both. After all, isn't that the essence of humanity? To turn poison into pleasure, threat into opportunity. In Earth's orbital diplomatic quarter, a secret meeting was taking place. Representatives from various species who had embraced coffee culture gathered to discuss the formation of what they called the Caffeinated Coalition. Their goal, to protect the right to drink coffee across the galaxy. Dr. James Henderson, attending as Earth's scientific advisor, couldn't help but smile as he watched a silicon being and an energy entity argue about the proper way to appreciate a dark roast. You know, he said to Sarah, who was watching the proceedings with a mixture of pride and concern, when I was a kid, I never thought I'd see aliens arguing about coffee brewing methods. When I was a kid, Sarah replied, I never thought coffee would become the center of a galactic controversy. Speaking of which, she pulled up a classified report on her tablet. We've detected unusual activity around that ancient space station. Whatever it was brewing, it's nearly ready. In the vast expanse of space, the crystallized caffeine structure pulsed with an energy that hadn't been seen in millions of years. Inside its cosmic chambers, ancient machinery hummed to life, preparing to dispense something that would either doom the galaxy or transform it forever. And on countless worlds across the galaxy, beings of all species and forms paused in their daily activities, feeling an inexplicable craving for something they couldn't quite name, a desire for warmth, for awakening, for connection. The coffee revolution had become something far greater than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just about a beverage anymore, it was about the very nature of consciousness, civilization, and cosmic destiny. And somewhere, in the quantum foam between dimensions, the ancient caffeine civilization watched, waited, and perhaps, smiled. The Resistance Brews. The warning came at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time, encoded in a burst of quantum-encrypted data from a deep space monitoring station. By 3:48 a.m., every coffee trading post in the galaxy had gone into lockdown. By 3:49 a.m., Director Sarah Chen was being rushed to the Department of Xenocaffeination's crisis bunker, clutching her emergency coffee supply. Show me, she ordered as soon as she reached the command center. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a sight that made her blood run cold. A fleet of ships, their hulls gleaming with an anti-caffeine coating that absorbed all traces of the molecule, was emerging from the darkness between the stars. The Anti-Coffee Coalition, as they called themselves, had finally made their move. We're detecting ships from at least 12 different species, her AI assistant reported. The silicon purists, the photosynthetic fundamentalists, the League of Unaltered Consciousness, they're all there. And they're heading straight for the ancient space station. Sarah took a long drink from her quantum-shielded mug. Get me Captain Morrison. Now. Aboard the Buenos Dias, now stationed near the mysterious caffeine structure, Captain Jack Morrison was already watching the approaching fleet. His ship, originally a simple cargo vessel, had been retrofitted with the latest in coffee-powered technology, a direct result of Dr. Helena Wong's breakthrough research into Compound X. They're charging weapons, his ship's AI reported. Energy signatures suggest they're using anti-caffeine pulse cannons. Jack grimaced. Warn the science team inside the station. And get me a direct line to the Caffeinated Coalition's defense fleet. Tell them it's time to wake up and smell the danger. Inside the ancient space station, Dr. Lyra Nash and her team were racing against time. The structure's central chamber had finally revealed its secrets, and they were more incredible than anyone had imagined. It's not just a brewing station, Lyra explained via quantum link to Sarah Chen. It's a consciousness accelerator. The ancient civilization, they weren't destroyed by caffeine. They evolved beyond physical form entirely, using coffee as a catalyst for transcendence. That's fascinating, Sarah replied tersely, but how does it help us with the fleet of angry aliens trying to destroy it? Don't you see? The station isn't a weapon, it's an invitation. The ancient civilization left it here as a gift, waiting for a species that could handle its power. That's why humans can metabolize caffeine. We're not an accident, we're their intended heirs. In the Galactic Council chambers, now operating in permanent emergency session, High Chancellor Zix, for 27 was facing a full-scale diplomatic meltdown. The Council had split into three factions, the Pro-Coffee Alliance, the Anti-Coffee Coalition, and the increasingly nervous neutral observers who just wanted everyone to switch to herbal tea. This is exactly what we feared. Ambassador Void Echo of the Anti-Coffee Coalition thundered, their energy form crackling with indignation. First coffee infiltrates our cultures, then it alters our consciousness, and now we discover it's all part of some ancient plan to transform the galaxy. It must be stopped. Transform, not destroy, countered Ambassador Crystalline, their coffee-infused structure gleaming. The awakened Crystal Collective has discovered levels of consciousness we never dreamed possible. The ancient ones weren't our enemies, they were our guides. Meanwhile, in the labs of the Galactic Science Academy, Dr. Helena Wong was making the final connections. Her research into Compound X had revealed something extraordinary. It wasn't just creating human-like neural patterns, it was preparing different species for compatibility with the ancient civilization's transcendence technology. The coffee culture, the trade routes, the diplomatic tensions, it was all part of the process, she explained to her team. The ancient civilization knew that true transcendence couldn't be achieved by a single species in isolation. They needed the galaxy to come together, to learn to handle their differences, their conflicts, their various ways of being, over a cup of coffee. Back at the space station, the situation was reaching critical mass. The Anti-Coffee Coalition's fleet had taken up attack positions, while the Caffeinated Coalition's defense forces held a protective formation around the structure. Captain Morrison's Buenos Dias sat in the middle, its coffee-powered shields humming. They're demanding we surrender the station, Jack reported to Sarah. They're claiming it's for the good of the galaxy. Inside the station, Lyra Nash and her team had made another discovery. The station's central chamber contained what appeared to be a massive quantum coffee maker, designed to brew on a cosmic scale. And according to their readings, it was about to activate, with or without their permission. Director Chen, Lyra's voice crackled over the quantum link, we don't have a choice anymore. The station's automatic systems are engaging. Whatever the ancient civilization planned, it's happening now. Sarah looked at the tactical display, watching as the two fleets prepared for battle. Everything they'd learned about coffee, about humanity's unique relationship with it, about the ancient civilization's legacy, it all came down to this moment. Dr. Nash, she said finally, what exactly will happen when that cosmic coffee maker activates? Based on our translations of the ancient data, it will release a wave of highly concentrated Compound X throughout the galaxy. Every sentient being will experience, well, the closest translation is, the ultimate coffee break, a moment of shared consciousness and understanding. And you're sure this won't harm anyone? The ancient civilization left very clear instructions. It's not an ending, it's an invitation to join them. But it only works if it's accepted voluntarily. That's why they waited for a species like us to discover it. We understand both the risks and rewards of coffee. We can help guide the galaxy through this transition. Sarah took a deep breath, then opened a channel to every ship in the standoff. This is Director Sarah Chen of Earth's Department of Xenocaffeination. To all species present, yes, coffee has changed the galaxy. It's created trade routes and cultural exchanges. It's caused conflicts and brought unlikely allies together. But most importantly, it's given us all something we never had before, a reason to sit down together, to share a moment of awakening, to find common ground in our differences. She paused, watching as the station began to glow with an increasingly bright, coffee-colored light. The choice before us isn't whether to fight or flee. It's whether we're ready to wake up, truly wake up, together. The light from the station grew brighter, and in ships throughout both fleets, beings of all species felt an familiar craving, not just for coffee, but for connection, for understanding, for transcendence. And in the quantum foam between dimensions, the ancient civilization watched, wondering if their long wait was finally over. The final sip. The universe, Dr. Helena Wong decided, had a peculiar sense of humor. Here she was, floating in the ancient space station's central chamber, watching as the fate of galactic civilization came down to what was essentially a giant cosmic coffee maker. The station's quantum cores hummed with energy, preparing for what the ancient texts called the Great Awakening. Status report, Director Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the quantum comm, somehow still managing to sound calm despite the two hostile fleets facing off outside. Helena checked the readings on her holographic display. The station's brewing process is at 94% completion. But Sarah, there's something else. The station's data cores are revealing new information about the ancient civilization. They didn't just transcend, they're still here, all around us, woven into the quantum fabric of spacetime itself. You're saying we've been drinking coffee in front of them this whole time? Sarah's voice carried a hint of amusement despite the crisis. More than that. Every cup of coffee ever brewed has been a tiny connection to their consciousness. They've been mentoring us, preparing us, one sip at a time. Outside the station, aboard the Buenos Dias, Captain Jack Morrison was engaged in what had to be the strangest standoff in military history. His ship's coffee-powered shields were holding, but the anti-coffee coalition's fleet had brought out their secret weapon, a massive vessel equipped with what they called a decaf ray. They're claiming they can neutralize the station's caffeine matrix, his AI reported. Though I feel compelled to point out that's not how chemistry works. Jack took a sip from his floating coffee mug, a habit that had become almost meditative during crises. Send a message to the caffeinated coalition ships. Tell them to hold position but don't fire. Something tells me this is going to resolve itself one way or another very soon. In the Galactic Council's emergency session, now being broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, High Chancellor Zix, for 27 was making one last attempt at diplomacy. Their bioluminescent patches had settled into a previously unknown pattern that the universal translators were interpreting as existential coffee anxiety. Representatives of the galaxy, they announced, their crystalline appendage tapping nervously on the quantum podium, we face an unprecedented moment. The ancient station is about to activate. We must decide, do we trust in the wisdom of a civilization that transcended physical form, or do we reject their gift out of fear? Ambassador Crystalline, their coffee-infused structure now glowing with an inner light that matched the station's energy signature, raised their faceted appendage. The Awakened Crystal Collective has studied the ancient texts extensively. This isn't an ending, it's an evolution. The Ancient Ones achieved something remarkable, they found a way to maintain their consciousness and individuality while joining something greater. Through coffee. Ambassador Void Echo's energy form flickered skeptically. Through understanding, came a new voice, and every being in the chamber turned to see Maya Rodriguez, Earth's first coffee ambassador, walking calmly to the podium. She carried with her an ancient artifact, a simple ceramic cup, discovered in the ruins of the first human civilization. This, she said, holding up the cup, is humanity's first contribution to galactic culture. Not the liquid inside, but what it represents. The moment when beings decide to sit down together, to share something that makes them vulnerable, that opens their minds to new possibilities. The ancient civilization didn't choose us because we could metabolize caffeine, they chose us because we turned it into an act of connection. In the station's central chamber, Dr. Nash's team had made a final discovery. The ancient data cores weren't just instruction manuals, they were consciousness imprints, the preserved experiences and wisdom of the transcended civilization. They're offering to guide us, Lyra reported excitedly. Not just through the transcendence process, but beyond. They've spent millions of years exploring higher dimensions, discovering the true nature of consciousness itself. And they want to share it with all of us. The station's energy levels peaked. The massive quantum coffee maker, a device that defied conventional physics, began its final sequence. Throughout both fleets, beings of all species suddenly found themselves experiencing something extraordinary, the smell of fresh coffee, not through physical senses, but through quantum entanglement with the very fabric of spacetime. In that moment, Dr. Helena Wong understood. It was never about the caffeine, she whispered. That was just the key that unlocked the door. The real gift was the way coffee brought different species together, forced us to confront our assumptions, our fears, our hopes. It prepared us for this moment, the ultimate first contact. The station's light reached impossible brightness, and then, transformed. It wasn't light anymore, but pure consciousness, radiating outward in waves of quantum probability. Every being in range felt it, a sensation like taking that first sip of coffee on a cold morning, like the moment of clarity when caffeine hits your system, like the comfortable silence shared between friends in a coffee shop. And with it came understanding. The ancient civilization hadn't abandoned the galaxy, they had become it. Every cup of coffee ever brewed had been a tiny communion with them, a gradual preparation for this moment when the boundaries between physical and transcendent existence would blur. Sarah Chen, watching from Earth's command center, felt it too. In that moment, she understood why humanity's love affair with coffee had been so important. They weren't just drinking it, they were practicing for this moment, learning to embrace something that could be dangerous or enlightening, something that required respect and understanding to master. The anti-coffee coalition's fleet powered down their weapons. The decaf ray, it turned out, was useless against quantum consciousness. The caffeinated coalition ships began receiving transmissions from their former opponents, not surrenders, but invitations to share in the experience. In the Galactic Council chamber, species that had been arguing moments before found themselves sharing memories, experiences, perspectives, not through words or universal translators, but through direct consciousness-to-consciousness contact. The ancient civilization's gift wasn't transformation into something else, but the ability to truly understand each other while remaining uniquely themselves. Captain Morrison, watching from his bridge as the wave of consciousness swept through space, laughed out loud. All this, he said to his AI, from a bunch of beans. I don't suppose the ancient ones left a recipe for quantum lattes. The AI's response was interrupted by a transmission, not through conventional channels, but directly into the consciousness of every being in range. It carried the accumulated wisdom of millions of years, the experiences of a civilization that had explored the highest dimensions of existence, and most surprisingly, a sense of joy and welcome. My fellow sentients, Maya Rodriguez's voice rang out across the galaxy, somehow both physical and transcendent. I believe it's time for the ultimate coffee break. And this time, everyone's invited. In the years that followed, the galaxy would never be quite the same. Coffee remained a uniquely human drink, but its spirit, the idea of taking time to connect, to share, to understand, became a universal constant. The ancient space station became known as the first café, a place where beings of all species could experience moments of transcendence while remaining grounded in their own forms of existence. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, the ancient civilization watched with satisfaction as their long experiment finally bore fruit. They had waited millions of years for a species that could handle their gift, not just the caffeine, but the wisdom to use it as a bridge between beings rather than a barrier. As for humanity, they did what they had always done, they adapted, they learned, and they kept brewing coffee. Only now, when someone ordered a cup of enlightenment, they meant it quite literally. In her office at the Department of Xenocaffeination, Sarah Chen kept that first ceramic cup on display. It reminded her that sometimes the most profound changes in the universe don't come from grand technological achievements or military might, but from simple acts of sharing something that makes you feel more awake, more aware, more alive. And every morning, beings across the galaxy, physical and transcendent alike, still began their day with a simple, profound question. Would you like to share a cup of coffee?